Hey guys, it's me, G Pickles, here to present more useless trivia about the Yakuza series. Throughout many of my videos, I have presented trivia for the Yakuza or Like a Dragon series that if you never knew in your life, or if you already did know it, will change nothing. It's stuff that not many people may actually know that really doesn't matter, but I personally find a lot of that sort of stuff interesting, and it's the kind of stuff I'd say to hot chicks at parties, if I ever went to them. And if I even knew what a woman was. I've heard of them, but I'm still not sure if they exist. The first of these little fun facts will be in the epic game Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name. So there are two types of special event matches that you can't do freely and have to be given some sort of prompt to do them after fulfilling certain conditions each time you want to do them. These are the Mr. Try and Hit Me matches and the gambling matches. In the soundtrack of Gaiden, there are two songs appropriately titled Gambling Match and Mr. Try and Hit Me. But did you know, and maybe you did if you paid attention, that the two songs play on the wrong types of matches? The song Gambling Match plays during the Mr. Try and Hit Me matches, and then, as you might expect, the wrong song plays during gambling matches. The reason for this could be one of a few. It could have been that the files in-game were mislabeled, that the code that picks which song to play was wrong, or that maybe the songs in the official soundtrack were wrong. But on to the next thing. In every Yakuza game, and I genuinely don't know why I do this in every Yakuza game, you can flick around the analog stick in a certain way and do some sort of unintentional movement. You can also tap the fighting stance button while moving or not moving to do stuff like make Yagami dance. Here is a short compilation of all the different things you can do. Speaking of Judgment, Ryo Hashikawa, composer of the Amon theme for Judgment as well as a couple of other songs in the game, also worked on the soundtrack for King of Fighters 14. Whether it was an ironic coincidence or intentionally done, the name of the song for the Amon theme was The Last Assassin 14 Symphony of the Judgment, which is a really short and easy name to say. Perhaps again another coincidence, or maybe Ryo Hashikawa was a genius, is that of the RGG games made by RGG Studio, so basically ignoring re-releases, Monkey Ball games, Binary Domain, and the two Kuroyo games, Judgment was, indeed, the 14th game in the series. This is almost like some Nomura level shit right here, but with 14 instead of 13. Now we head back to Gaiden again, this time talking about another era. Across the series, a lot of the time you'll be given some sort of grab escape attack where you throw a dude that's grabbed you or you elbow them in the back and yada yada. Gaiden has this skill available to both fighting styles and it works exactly the same as you'd expect, only in the English version of the game there is seemingly a mistranslation. Whether or not the same thing happened in other language versions of the game, I'm not sure. I am bilingual but I only speak English and Australian, so I can't really help any of you Italian viewers out, if any of you exist. But I can confirm this wasn't an error in the original Japanese text, because when compared to Lost Judgment, being the game that Gaiden largely was based off of, which had the correct English text for the ability descriptions of the snake grab reversal and the universal grab reversal hit action, had the exact same Japanese text as the ability description in the Japanese version of Gaiden. You could probably figure out what this ability actually is if you've played all the other games or just by guessing hard enough from reading the description and looking at the image, but if you're not some omnipotent wizard or something and are just an average player, you're probably not going to know what the hell this ability is. But there are three abilities, two from Lost Judgment and one from Yakuza 0, that I was kind of surprised to find out wasn't an error in the Japanese version of either game and was a mistake made in, at the very least, the English versions. I have mentioned two of these abilities in videos in the past, but there's one I missed. The two I covered was Lost Judgment's Flashing Palm and Yakuza 0's Thug Cunning Harsh Lesson. Flashing Palm is actually one of the best skills in the game, allowing your charge finishes to completely pierce an enemy's guard when you're at max health, basically treating as though they weren't blocking at all. There's no special animation when you pierce a guard, and it actually just looks like the dude you hit let go of the block at the last nanosecond and got hit. It also doesn't help that the buttons it tells you to press are backwards. You are not meant to hold down the light attack button after a heavy attack. Instead, what it's trying to tell you to do is how to do a charged finisher, with it being hold down heavy attack after doing a light attack. And in the same vein, Thug Cunning Harsh Lesson has the wrong button listed. Rather than it being fighting stance plus heavy attack as the input, like a standard counterattack in the Yakuza games, it is instead a parry, requiring you to press the grab button. Both of these abilities having wrong buttons is again a translation error, although it's a long story, but Yakuza 0's English version was actually based off of the Chinese version, so maybe that version made the mistake. But anyway, the third skill is Lost Judgment's Crane King's Might. Much like Flashing Palm, this skill once again has backwards buttons. You do not hold down the light attack button to charge these, and instead you have to do a finisher and continue holding down the button, essentially being the Crane Styles version of a charged finisher. Now then, in Infinite Wealth, the stat distribution of characters and jobs was massively improved from a very general viewpoint from the previous game, although not really from a completionist's viewpoint, but who cares, whatever. In the previous game of Yakuza Like a Dragon, each character's exclusive job and all of the universal ones just kinda had like randomly picked numbers for stat growths. For example, they just went, yeah, let's give Namba like 2 defense, but we'll give Jungi Han so much agility that he'll be able to have a turn so early he'll be in Yakuza 6. No way, that joke doesn't really work. Back to Infinite Wealth though, it's time for an actually somewhat useful tip. In the game, they will show you quite plainly the stat growth of each job, including the unique ones. Now besides the physical and magic attack of Freelancer, Sujimancer, and Dragon, all of these bars are consistent across each job. What do I mean by all this? Well, allow me to explain. Every job that has 3 bars of agility, for example, will have the same agility so long as those 2 jobs are the same level. Now I don't remember exactly which characters I gave what stat boosters to, but you can see how making Adachi and Tomizawa both a breaker, there is an almost negligible difference in stats. I'm not sure if this is exactly the reason, but I believe the slight difference in stats could have something to do with the stats that a character actually starts with when you get them, but again, I'm not exactly sure. But anyway, depending on how you've built a character yourself and whatever other factors will give a character like 2 extra defense, no one's really specialized to being a certain job. Instead, what really matters is the synergy of your inherited skills and the main class you make the character. For example, Namba's homeless guy job has a dog shit attack, so you wouldn't want to give him any physical skills. But even though his default job does have low attack, you can make him a samurai, and unless you give him bad gear, he'll be able to gain more attack than Ichiban as a hero, or Jungi-han as a hitman, or, thanks to the weaponsmith, can get even higher attack than Kiryu as a dragon. And speaking of the Dragon of Dojima, that job, Freelancer, and Sujimancer all can't equip any weapons, so to compensate, they will be given a much higher attack and magic attack increase per job level up, meaning that with raw stats, these 3 jobs have the highest attack stats in the game. This then leads me into the more useless bit of trivia. I am going to list which jobs have the highest and lowest of each stat in the game, which will be based purely off the bars displayed in the job screen. For HP, the highest goes to Action Star, Detective, and Dragon. For the lowest, it's Host, Aquanaut, Desperado, Kunoichi, Geodancer, Barmaid, Cabbie, Homeless Guy, and Hitman, all of which have 2 bars of HP instead of the typically 1 bar that most other low stats have. Then for MP, the highest is with Desperado, Barmaid, and Cabbie, whereas the lowest is Dragon. For physical attack, technically it's Freelancer and Dragon, but basing it purely off of those bars, it's Freelancer, Dragon, Samurai, Pyrodancer, Night Queen, and Gangster. For the lowest attack, Sujimancer has much higher attack than these other 2 as I've mentioned, but the ones with 1 bar are Sujimancer, Housekeeper, and Homeless Guy. For physical defense, the highest is Linebacker, whereas the lowest goes to Host and Pyrodancer. For magic again, technically it's Sujimancer, but the ones with 5 bars are Sujimancer, Host, Geodancer, and Homeless Guy. Then the lowest magic is again technically not Freelancer, but the 1 bar magic jobs are Freelancer, Action Star, Linebacker, and Tennis Ace. Then for willpower, the highest is Sujimancer, Host, Housekeeper, and Homeless Guy, which interestingly, they all only have 4 bars of willpower instead of 5, but then the lowest willpower is Pyrodancer, Night Queen, and Gangster. And finally, the jobs with the highest agility are Breaker, Kunoichi, and Hitman, whereas the job with the lowest agility in the game is Detective, and poor old Adachi just can't catch a break because his agility is so laughably low. Sometimes when I use him, I don't even get to use him. But here's a fun fact. If you were to add up each of the bars to create each job's base stat total, the jobs with the highest base stat totals are Freelancer, Sujimancer, Dragon, Tennis Ace, and Linebacker, all of which have a total of 22. Makes sense for these 3 unarmed jobs, but it also makes sense to give the jobs you have to pay for just slightly better stats than every single other job in the game, all of which have a base stat total of 21. Except, for some weird reason, Cabbie has a base stat total of 20. Just Cabbie. I don't know why they did it, but they did. And another thing you may have already caught on to is that RGG did something that I think is quite cool, being that Hero has perfectly even stats in every category, whereas Freelancer and Sujimancer have inverse stats of each other, with Freelancer prioritizing physical and Sujimancer prioritizing magic. And the final thing before I move on to the next section is that Sizzling Spitter, one of Namba's spells, will have its text box hang out of the frame if you are using a keyboard, which that's just funny to me, I think. And now, as always from me, it's time to talk about some differences between the audio languages of the games, because literally no one ever talks about anything to do with the English dub or now the Chinese dub on YouTube except for me, so allow me to be that guy. Who plays the Yakuza games in English or Chinese? Yeah, fuck you. On my second playthrough of Infinite Wealth, that I only did like a month after the game came out because I needed to record stuff and because I hate myself, when I got up to the Allo Happy introduction, I decided to check something for no real reason. Between all three dubs, they do the same joke with him, being that he's not all too particularly happy despite his name. I will say that the English version of that scene is like 10 times funnier than the other two, but here's a quick comparison between the three dubs, and I want you to try and spot something with the subtitles.
Sounds like you're just pawning off your extra inventory.
What a zinger! You're busting my balls here.
Ha ha ha! American joke. いいね。哈哈哈！美式玩笑，很不错。
It's okay if you didn't notice, because genuinely who gives a shit, but the Chinese version of this scene uses the English dub subtitle track, despite it basically just being the exact same as the Japanese version. Having different subtitle tracks is expected from these games thanks to the efforts made by the localization team with Judgment, or maybe Fist of the North Star Lost Paradise, I don't know. This was done because in the dub of Judgment, they couldn't reanimate any of the facial animations in properly animated cutscenes, so because Japanese and English are very different languages, and because they had to fit the mouth movements in those scenes, a lot of the structure of sentences needed to be rearranged to the point where, if they were to just use one subtitle track, one of the two dubs would be very mismatched. This trend was then maintained in every game from then on that had a dub. But anyway, back in Infinite Wealth, the subtitles of the Chinese dub are seemingly a hybrid of the subtitle tracks for English and Japanese, and the facial animations and cutscenes are also set to match the Japanese dub, which is a little unfortunate considering the English dub actually got the benefit of reanimated faces, much like a Dragon's English dub did. And just like a Dragon, having reanimated faces meant that the English dub had a lot more freedom with what they could say, allowing them to say lines that are much closer to the Japanese dub than with something like Judgment and Lost Judgment. With both Like a Dragon and Infinite Wealth, they still did need to match the timing of the scene as well as the body movements, and they also still needed to adjust lines that when said out loud in English just sort of don't make sense. It's still not been enough time for me to analyze every scene across all three dubs, but I can say that it's very much like Judgment, Like a Dragon, and Lost Judgment, where the English script is basically untouched until it needs to be touched. In Judgment, for example, nothing in the story was ever notably changed, but there was still some stuff that just doesn't hit the same in English. Did you know that Kaito's iconic
Damn it! These guys won't stop coming on us!
line in Japanese was just a shitty pun about Vans, and the reason everyone looked at him with disappointment wasn't because it was gross, but was because they were disappointed that he accidentally made the joke. Van in Japanese is bun, and bun bun basically means doing something quickly. So when the vans are quickly approaching, in Japanese it's basically the vans are van-vanning. But that sounds fucking ridiculous in English. So instead, one of the members of the English team came up with the single greatest scene in gaming history, which they even subtitled as such in the Japanese version because there still is no good way to explain that joke in English. Tangent aside, back again in Infinite Wealth, stuff like that Allo Happy scene in Chinese uses the English subtitles in the English version of the game, but for the properly animated cutscenes, the Chinese dub uses the Japanese dub subtitles. This is most obvious with Eiji's catchphrase. In Japanese as well as Chinese, he says bon voyage, which is subtitled as such in both versions.
そちらこそ Bon voyage 希望你也开心 Bon voyage.
But in English, he actually says ahoy ho.
Thanks again.
Oh, hui-ho.
Which is something that people apparently say in Hawaii, so it makes way more sense because who the fuck says bon voyage? Shut up, France. Another example of dub differences is all of the spoken English, or honestly, if I'm to give it a short and appropriate title, the English. Across all three dubs, characters that exclusively speak English all have the same voice lines in all three versions. For example, these cops that show up when Ichiban and Tomizawa fight. But characters that speak English and Japanese in the Japanese dub are all different voice actors. Anyone who's played the Japanese dub would know that characters like Roman and Dwight bizarrely will have a completely different voice actor whenever they speak English, or Wong To in English and Japanese when he speaks Chinese will suddenly have a different voice as it's actually audio pulled from the Chinese dub of that scene. But then characters like Tomizawa, Eiji, and Bryce will all get their Japanese voice actors to speak English. In the English dub, all of Roman's lines are done by one guy who actually does an incredibly good job, and Dwight is of course voiced by Danny Trejo himself, meaning one actor for each character. But then Eiji and Bryce speak normal English with no accent, whereas Tomizawa's voice actor did a funny little accent when he speaks English to the cops. In Chinese, and I was incredibly surprised by how good this all sounds, all of the spoken English will be done by the Chinese voice actors themselves, or at least I think so. It definitely doesn't sound like a different voice actor, but it's also all significantly less jarring and easier to understand than the Japanese dub. So without further ado, here's a comparison between all of the English, as I'll keep calling it, between all of the dubs.
Officer, help! I'm being robbed! Officer, help! I'm being robbed!
Officer, help! I am being robbed!
This hoodlum wanted money, and he pointed a gun right at me. This hoodlum wanted my money, and he pointed a gun right at me.
This hoodlum want my money, and he pointed a gun right at me!
Yeah, arrest that scumbag. I'm pissing myself over here.
Yeah, arrest that scumbag. I'm pissing myself over here.
Come on, arrest that scumbag! I'm pissing myself over here!
Hold on, officer. That man is no thief.
Hold on, officer. That man is no thief.
Hold on, officers! That man is no thief!
Who you should be arresting is the driver.
Who you should be arresting is the driver.
Who you should be arresting is the driver!
He's the real thief. And if you need proof, I recorded the whole thing.
He's the real thief. And if you need proof, I recorded the whole thing.
He's the real thief. And if you need proof, I recorded the whole thing. Here.
Oh, Roman! Hey, who you got there with you?
Oh, these guys? they're no one.
Oh, just a side job. Really, nothing big.
Huh. It's just a side job. Really, nothing big. Anyway, what's going on? Why'd you shut everything down?
Anyway, what's going on? Why'd you shut everything down?
Anyway, what happened here? You shut the whole place down?
Yeah, didn't want to stain the merchandise.
Stain it? Oh, come on, man. You don't think that I would...
Stain it? How? Exactly.
Stain it how? Exactly.
Today I'm going to give you boys a live demonstration. Time to bleed! Today I'm gonna give you boys a live demonstration. Time to bleed!
I think it's time I showed you what this blade of mine can do. Ready to bleed?
Cease this at once.
Cease this at once. Cease this at once.
Madam Naylor, you see, forbids the use of fire in human conflicts. Now, be good and hand me the gun. Attempting to shoot will only make things worse for you. Such a pity. Allow me to tend to your wounds.
Madam Naylor, you see, forbids the use of fire in human conflicts. Now, be good and hand me the gun. Attempting to shoot will only make things worse for you. Such a pity. Allow me to tend your wounds.
Madam Naylor, you see, forbids the use of fire in human conflicts. Now, be good and hand me the gun. Attempting to shoot will only make things worse for you. Such a pity. Allow me to tend to your wounds.
The final dub trivia in Infinite Wealth is that for some reason the English voice actor of Sawashiro in the game, being Ian Anthony Dale, who was way better than I was expecting, isn't credited in the credits. Instead, it's Brian Bloom, his old voice actor in Like a Dragon. I miss you, Brian. Up next, I'm going to talk about an iconic scene from Yakuza Like a Dragon which was recounted in Gaiden, being the dissolution of the Tojo and Omi. Oh, spoilers, dude. Nope, shut up. Lost Judgment and Infinite Wealth spoiled it before I did. Across these two games, the scene is virtually identical as it tells all the same story beats basically, but some key differences include the drastically changed lighting, all of the new lines and shots of Kiryu and Tsuruno, and a slightly less important detail is that it was 3 cutscenes in Like a Dragon, with the first 2 being pre-rendered and the third being rendered in-game, but in Gaiden, it's all in one unbroken pre-rendered cutscene right up until you actually start the fight. And also that pre-rendered cutscenes in Like a Dragon were a considerable considerably lower frame rate and resolution than the Gaiden ones, because Like a Dragon was originally a PS4 exclusive, and this was back in the day when PC ports were barely a priority and it was before the next generation released. But anyway, I thought I would showcase the changes in this scene between Like a Dragon and Gaiden that are a lot less obvious. And, because I can, I figured I would also showcase the differences in the two English dub versions of this scene. Why? Well, Gaiden's dub was a bit cursed. Due to time constraints, the dub of the game had to be released as post-launch content, which the community was very whatever the opposite of toxic is about it. But when the dub released, out of curiosity, I went and checked this scene specifically, considering it was from a previous game. Now, Like a Dragon had the benefit of reanimated faces, but Gaiden did not. Or at least this scene didn't, I don't know. I played it in Japanese, obviously, before everyone gets mad at me for no reason. So because of the differences in this scene, they couldn't just reuse the Like a Dragon one, and couldn't copy facial animation data and re-render the scene without taking up an extra 40 terabytes of storage that Gaiden was already obliterating. So using most of the audio from the original scene, the English team did what they could and altered a lot of the dialogue to fit the Japanese facial animations and timing that they originally didn't really need to worry about. Now then, there are some overarching differences I'll mention here to make it quicker. The music across the whole scene was a fair bit quieter. Daigo's explanatory monologue to Ichiban was removed, understandably, because we're Kiryu. The applause at the start was then made louder because there's no Daigo. In English, Watase and Daigo's lines were identical but re-recorded, with James C. Burns, aka Frank Woods, still voicing Watase, and Daigo being recasted for whatever reason. And throughout the scene, the various songs are different, whether it be timing or just a different song entirely. A particularly obvious one, if you're autistic, is the song that plays at the end of the scene has slightly different timing due to them removing Kiryu's title card in Gaiden as, you know, he's us, which that would also explain why Tsuruno chimes in for no reason to sort of fill in the time that was cut. And a very specific difference is that in the original, Ichiban takes off his jacket, which makes Kiryu do his classic huh smile for obvious reasons. But in Gaiden, they cut to him smiling after Ichiban and Tsuruno compliment him. But I think the reason for that is because Ichiban is basically a special guest in this scene, so they decided to not cut away from his time of glory, but still wanted to keep in Kiryu's cheeky little smile. And with that out of the way, it's time to show you more specific differences between the two scenes. Every time the footage on screen is from Like a Dragon, there'll be the 7 from the Japanese logo in the corner, and because Gaiden doesn't have any defining symbol in the title, because I couldn't really be bothered with thinking something creative, all Gaiden footage will be denoted by a little PNG of Kiryu in the opposite corner.
The ones with tenure, anyway, are still here in certain
Damn, seeing these Tojo Clan legends fighting is fucking crazy!
Yeah, very impressive. These guys are all Omi officers, huh? There are still this many? Even with half of them in Kamurocho?
If I didn't know any better, I'd say you sound excited.
I'm not excited!
Tendo,
I'd say we're still looking pretty outnumbered here. That's the whole reason they called us, man.
Now originally, I was going to play all of the edited audio side by side, but it was too hard to follow and was going to take way too long, so instead you'll just have to trust me on all of this. Here are all of the lines where a pause in the original was removed or shortened.
What? Why are you doing this, Captain? What are you thinking? Tojo Clan. The fuck's he doing here?
Bullshit! What kind of shady crap is this?
Fuck you, Watase! You're a goddamn traitor!
Then here's all of the lines where a pause was added or extended.
Huh? What the fuck? You twisting the knife on us, Tendo?
Damn it. This has gone far enough.
So he's finally back. The Dragon of Dojima.
Then there were 2 lines that were slowed down slightly.
This kind of brawl.
And then this one line that was actually sped up.
I made sure this would be nice and sharp for today.
So if we're gonna make history here, you bet your ass I'm gonna take a stand with the side having the most fun.
And there were a fair few other audio differences I noticed, but for the most part the lines were untouched, and instead were just played slightly later or slightly earlier than the original. Although interestingly, Ichiban's lines were all basically untouched. Now that you've seen all that, you might think that the way the English dialogue was handled was just a lot of corner cutting, and Yes, it was. But it's not a bad thing, of course. The dub was already delayed, and delaying it further would have been a big dumb idiot decision, so they worked with what they had. Developers all across the globe cut corners all the time, because there's so much shit that just isn't at all worth putting in the time for. I mean, I cut corners all the time in my own videos, but I can tell you right now that no one will ever notice it. There's a lot of people who like to act high and mighty and pretend like they notice stuff like this, but I mean, how many of you have noticed the person standing behind you right now? But yeah, it's understandable what the English team did with this scene, because someone like John Eric Bentley, who voices Tendo, was very likely recording for 7 Rebirth and voicing the only character in that game I gave a shit about at the time of Gaiden being worked on, and even if he wasn't, imagine them sending him an email saying, "Hey dude, could you record these like 2 lines that you already recorded for us back in 2020, but do it slightly different? And you want to know something else about the English dub?" Are they gone? Alright, I think the adamant English dub haters are gone now, so I'm safe to say this. Shishido's English voice actor, man, what the fuck? Why is he so good? Again, I obviously played the game in Japanese because I played it when it came out, but man, Matt Bushell killed it. And now that's the end of the video. Yes, the whole latter half was about dubs in the Yakuza games, but in all honesty, those sorts of things are never gonna get talked about by anyone for whatever reason, and even though it's completely useless information, I find that shit interesting, so I want at least someone to talk about it. But I mean, who knows, maybe it isn't completely worthless. Maybe there'll be a day where Reina from Yakuza 0 and 1/Kiwami walks up to you and you, not wanting to pull a Nishiki and fumble the bag with the baddest bitch who has ever lived, as the cool guys on the internet like to say, will try to impress her. Hey, want to hear a fun fact? Did you know that in the hit game Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, the English subtitles for the game's Chinese dub are actually a hybrid between the Hey, where are you going? But anyway, if you thought any of this video was interesting or funny or whatever, then do me a favor and share the video around with all your mates. And while you're at it, like and subscribe too. Please. Please, I'm serious. Or become a member. I mean, anything really. The amount of money I get back from the time and effort I put into all of my videos, I just can't really justify making them anymore. I can't even branch out and try and capture a new audience like my family suggests, because then I put a lot of time and effort into something that won't even get a fraction of the views. But that wasn't very funny, so instead, I'll leave you with the funniest joke anyone's ever heard in their entire life.